The illegitimate Trump Supreme Court just allowed ICE to racially profile American citizens. That's right. On Monday, in a 6-3 decision, the Heritage Foundation's handpicked Supreme Court halted an injunction from a lower court, as well as an appeals court, that barred officers from targeting people based on their ethnicity, doing the racial profiling. That's right. Monday's case, Noem v. Vasquez Perdomo, revolves around the Trump administration's invasion of LA, which again was also illegal, where immigration and customs enforcement officers were directed to arrest anyone suspected of lacking legal status. Now, how did they come to their conclusions, right? Of who might be here illegally to stop? Obviously, by looking at them. That's really it. These masked thugs who refuse to identify themselves as law enforcement while carrying weapons and targeting locations where people of a certain race frequently congregate. They ended up targeting individuals who appeared to be Latino and who spoke Spanish, arresting them first and then determining their citizenship status later. Now, keep that in mind because later on, you're going to have one of these Supreme Court justices making an absurd argument that contradicts that. But during these arrests, officers would routinely use police brutality, often throwing targets against the wall, down on the ground, or against the wall for no reason. And if they're not doing that, they would hold them at gunpoint until they could produce their papers. Show me your papers! Well, let me tell you what. Does that sound like freedom and liberty? Does it? Does it? Or does it sound like something else? Look, a lot of the people who got targeted were revealed to be American citizens and ended up being released. Those of them who were not American citizens were thrown into detention camps, concentration camps, and or flown out of the United States to who knows where. Who knows where. Now, the American citizens that got targeted and detained illegally ended up suing the federal government. They won an injunction from a federal district court. They ruled that the operation at large, that's what they called the invasion of LA, egregiously violated the Constitution, specifically the Fourth Amendment, the prohibition against unreasonable search and seizure. Now, in order for law enforcement to be able to lawfully search or seize individuals, their property, there must be a reasonable suspicion that they have committed a crime. What crime did these people commit? I mean, the last I checked, being Latino is not a crime. And yet, these officers, they just would see someone who is a Latino and immediately arrest and detain them without giving them due process. Because again, due process is how you prove that you are a citizen in this case. Okay? Without that due process, without being given the chance to prove their citizenship, they have been denied their rights. Now, the Trump regime and its racist Supreme Court members, they disagree with the Fourth Amendment. They think it's totally fine that ICE will be able to seize people for simply being members of a particular ethnic group. Okay? Now, before this decision, the lower court had previously barred the government from arresting people based on 4 factors, in combination or alone: appearing Hispanic, speaking Spanish or accented English, working a particular type of job, and being present at a place where immigrants are known to congregate. Once again, the administration had sued, but an appeals court upheld this injunction and upheld the Constitution. But unfortunately, the far right has figured out how to do an end run around the lower courts by asking their hand-picked Supreme Court justices for what they call emergency relief, which they received. Now, what's the emergency here? What's the emergency? What's the reasoning behind granting this emergency relief? The constitutional impetus behind this. What is it? There was no explanation from the bench, no argument, no legal precedent. In fact, they went against legal precedent. There was nothing but blind obedience to the Mad King. That's it. Now, in a very forceful dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor warned that this decision was unconscionably irreconcilable with our nation's constitutional guarantees, opening the door to violent persecution of Latinos, including American citizens, by masked agents with guns. To which they responded with nothing, really. At least nothing to try to justify their decision. No argument, no explanation. Later on, Justice Kavanaugh does give kind of a little bit of a rebuttal, I suppose. But really, this has become a pattern. Over and over again, the conservative supermajority has frozen orders against the government without offering a single word of explanation as to why they're ignoring the Constitution that they all had sworn to uphold. Now, joining with Sotomayor, you had Justices Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson all signing on to say this. We should not have to live in a country where the government can seize anyone who looks Latino, speaks Spanish, and appears to work a low-wage job. And yet, thanks to the Supreme Court, we now do. You know what that means to me? That the Supreme Court is not a legitimate court. Not anymore. This is not my opinion. This is not because I don't like their decisions. This is because these 6 justices have clearly violated their own oaths of office to uphold the Constitution. They are not doing so. They are an illegitimate body. Look, I didn't like their opinion on, for example, student loans. Okay? That didn't, to me, make them an illegitimate court. That didn't make them, in my opinion, unfit to be in their positions. I didn't like their decisions. But this does. This is so blatantly unconstitutional that in 50 years, they will be teaching about this in history class, assuming, of course, the United States still exists in 50 years, as an example of blatant judicial activism and a captured court. Okay? Captured under a wannabe dictator. Now, Sotomayor lays out in her dissent that the freedom from arbitrary interference by law enforcement officers is a constitutional guarantee. Yet under Trump, it may no longer exist for those who happen to look a certain way, speak a certain way, and appear to work a certain type of legitimate job that pays very little. And again, it's not immigrants. As she notes, United States citizens are also being seized, taken from their jobs, and prevented from working to support themselves and their families, simply for doing nothing more than going to work every day, while being a Latino speaking Spanish. She added that this administration has all but declared that all Latinos, U.S. citizens or not, who work low-wage jobs are fair game to be seized at any time, taken away from work, and held until they provide proof of their legal status to the agent's satisfaction. Trampling the constitutional requirement, the officers must have a particularized and objective basis for suspecting that a particular person stopped of criminal activity. She also points out that this violates Supreme Court precedent because the court had once ruled that Mexican ancestry alone cannot justify a law enforcement stop, even near the southern border, nor can the presence in a neighborhood known for illicit drugs. So, I mean, again, that they are clearly, this administration, this regime, and their enforcement, okay, immigration, are violating the Constitution on a daily basis with their roving patrols. That's what they're doing, okay? And it is very, very clear. Now, in response, of course, Justice Brett Kavanaugh downplayed what's going on. Because, of course, right? He claimed that ICE agents are just merely conducting brief investigative stops just to check the immigration status of those people whose occupations are attractive to illegal immigrants. If the officers learn that the individual they stopped is a U.S. citizen or otherwise lawfully in the United States, they promptly let that individual go. No, they don't. No, they don't. And again, people have been arrested and have been detained for periods of time, varying periods of time, until they were able to, yes, prove their citizenship status. But that's wrongful arrest. That's kidnapping. That's what that is. Kidnapping. People are being kidnapped by masked ICE agents. And this asshole downplays it. This drunk, okay? I like beer. Well, so do I. So do I. This alleged rapist, okay, on the Supreme Court. Remember that? This guy downplays the violence being perpetrated against a particular group of people. This man, no business being on the court. Any of these people, no business being on the court. These Heritage Foundation, sellouts, okay? Sold their soul. Whatever soul they actually had to Donald Trump, the far right. Because that was what they were created for, okay? That's what they were groomed to do by the Heritage Foundation. To be a rubber stamp for a fascist. Now, he added that under the Constitution, ethnicity may be a relevant factor in determining who is unlawfully present in the United States. Sotomayor responded by writing that no matter what the justice would like to believe, the truth is that ICE is not conducting brief stops for questioning. Its agents are seizing people using firearms, physical violence, and warehouse detentions. She also pointed out, very, very importantly, that Kavanaugh's position is creating a second-class citizenship status for anyone who is Latino, but I would also expand it to not white, forcing them to carry around citizenship papers with them if they want to just be able to walk around the city freely or risk being thrown into indefinite detention. This is the reality now. And Kavanaugh is not he's not in the real world. He is in Trump world. And you know what's sad, though? The worst part about this is that this is what a lot of people voted for. It is. Even now, polling finds that 49% of Americans had approved of Donald Trump's approach to immigration, while only 45% disapprove. Okay? And there was Gallup polling in July that showed that only 38% of Americans approved of the mass deportations. So, still, those two polls show that you still have at least a third of all Americans, sizable amount, saying that, yes, this is exactly what we wanted. This is exactly what we voted for. This is what we voted for. And they want to argue that the United States is not a racist country. Kind of seems like we are. Kind of seems like we are. I mean, the country, the government is allowing masked thugs to kidnap members of a certain racial group off the streets. Seems kind of racist to me. And again, this is not about enforcing immigration law. You know what this is about? It's enforcing white supremacy. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon in order to get notified whenever a new video is released. And if you want to support independent, progressive media through this difficult time where it seems like everybody is shutting down, you can become a member on our YouTube page, you can become a subscriber on Facebook, or you can go to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Thank you.